Welcome to this week's edition of Outdoors Online, a weekly webcast produced by the North Dakota Game and Fish Department. I'm your host, Mike Anderson. My guest this week is Wildlife Division Chief Jeb Williams. Jeb, we're out in probably one of the most beautiful areas in North Dakota, the Badlands of North Dakota.
Yeah, as you said, I mean, it's obviously a unique place, unique area. Yeah, it's just a remarkable place for both critters and for people.
You know, Game and Fish has done a lot of studies on wildlife out here in the last decade. Let's talk about some of those, and actually we just started one here this winter.
Yeah, so first, Mike, let me visit about the opportunities that we have to do studies and how fortunate we are to do those studies, and backing up and talking about just the conservation funding model that states have in place. It's a user pay system. Of course, the dollars that we receive as an agency it's a user pay system. The people that buy the hunting, fishing licenses and the people that buy the equipment needed for the hunting opportunities is what funds state agencies, and then some additional opportunities that we have to do some research projects and management of properties, and I mean, just a variety of different things. But it's such a unique model that we're very appreciative of, and all states are. Hunters are appreciative of it as well too. They like their dollars going towards something that they're passionate about, and it's a win-win for everyone. And we've really been fortunate over the years to have a good budget to be able to learn, to be able to to take our curiosity and to learn, but then also be able to apply those things that we're learning about to our management of these species. Being curious and learning is a great thing. We also want to make sure that that's applicable then to our management of the different critters that we're learning about and doing some different research on. I mean, as an agency, we say over and over again how data-driven we are, and there's no doubt about that. And having these research projects available, and the great willingness of staff, the staff that we have available to help and assist and do these research projects. It's one of a kind situation that we're very proud of as an agency.
Sure, let's move into the elk study, Jeb, that we started, I think, in December, January anyway.
Yeah, real unique project in the Badlands, the western part of North Dakota, all up and down the Little Missouri River Valley, expanding out a little bit on the east and on the west, that type of thing. But western part of North Dakota, 11 different areas where we collared 90 elk, and as you can imagine, that's a pretty big effort. And so a lot of dedication from our staff and from the folks that we contract with, as far as the capturing effort, as far as the university that we're partnering with on the research project, and then obviously in North Dakota too. And we're talking about land, and we're talking about private land, and we're talking about some public land out here, but it's a mixture. And really good cooperation from the landowners as well to be able to learn about these elk out here. And one of our reasons for being so curious about the elk in western part of the state is we weren't sure 10 years ago what was going to happen with elk in this part of the state after the reduction effort that took place in Theodore Roosevelt National Park in the South Unit. But we slowly started seeing elk, smaller bunches spread out, kind of take up shop, develop some new home areas where they weren't quite as dependent on their movements back to the South Unit of Theodore Roosevelt National Park. And so really establishing kind of their own home territory. And so that created some opportunity for the department. It created some challenges for the department. And so this research project will help all of those and helping us manage those critters better, as far as understanding their home ranges better, understanding their survival rates, helping us put together better survey protocols for us to better understand the numbers that are out there, and to be able to work with private landowners, and then be able to provide as much sportsman opportunity for the as you all know, the very valuable once-in-a-lifetime elk opportunity that exists in the state.
Okay, Jeb, let's move on to mule deer. I mean, we've done some studies in the Badlands on mule deer here in the last decade too.
Yeah, some real good information, and it's not a big secret that obviously the Badlands of North Dakota has experienced some changes in the last number of years. There's always been some oil and gas development out here going back into the 70s and 80s even, but no doubt the last 10 to 15 years that's that has picked up some. And so there was a lot of questions out there about what kind of impacts are associated with that, and especially mule deer. You think of the Badlands, you tend to think of mule deer, a place that people love to recreate, a place that mule deer call home in North Dakota. And so it was a great project. You know, some things that were surprising, some things not so surprising, but there are parts of the year, obviously, where mule deer are pretty sensitive, you know, the fawning season, and then, of course, during the winter months. And so, you know, some of that research showed that if there can be some coordination between, you know, conservation groups, game and fish, oil and gas, as far as some planning and timing of developing those different times of the year, you know, there's some benefits there. There's been some improvements, I think, over the years too, as far as combining, you know, some of the pads, and that was something that saw in the research project as well too, that, you know, the more disturbance out there obviously creates that traffic and, you know, lots of extra disturbance at a certain period of time. Well, if you have that combined to a certain area, that can possibly help that. So there were some things learned, obviously, that, you know, we hope to be able to see some benefits of mule deer over the long term.
Okay, let's move on to pronghorn. The Pronghorn Study was probably about a decade or a little bit more than a decade ago. We've learned some things about pronghorns.
We have, yeah, and, you know, again, pronghorn are a critter that people really like to take advantage of. It doesn't come across very often for them in North Dakota, simply because our numbers aren't, you know, super plentiful, and there's, again, a lot of competition for people that like that resource. Obviously, one of the things with pronghorn is their ability. They do have some migration, and you know, there are some things that definitely play a role in preventing the movement, and we definitely saw that in the study. You know, I mean, interstate, you know, was no doubt a barrier, and so, you know, obviously there's not much you can do there, right? There's some different alternatives and different options that you look at and doing, but one of the things too we also learned was the mortality factor associated with pronghorn was very high as far as human related and hunting. You know, I mean, that hunting plays a significant role, you know, on pronghorn numbers in North Dakota. That was something we found with the capture, with the mark and capture returns of those callers. And so that was something that, you know, that, not saying that that's a surprise, but that is something that is taken into very serious consideration when we're setting license numbers. And it also gets into the discussion then too, is how aggressive do you be? How conservative do you be, knowing that in North Dakota, winter still plays a role, and, you know, you never can stockpile wildlife in North Dakota as well. You know what I mean? And so it gets to be that balance. But a lot of different, really interesting things learned associated with that study as well, that's helped us as we've gone along here now over the number of years with pronghorn management.
Okay, one of the most unique species in the North Dakota Badlands, bighorn sheep.
Yeah, bighorn sheep, and even though bighorn sheep don't have a big footprint in the North Dakota Badlands, never did. You know, I mean, the habitat here is fairly limited as far as the real rough Badlands, steep breaks, those types of things that bighorn sheep really rely on. You know, a presence in North Dakota is important for a lot of people. It's probably one of the species we get maybe the most comments on, most pictures of, whether it's people out here hunting, people out here just recreating, sending in pictures saying, hey, I saw the sheep at such and such location. And so they are a critter that people really admire and really like to see. And so the management of the sheep has always been a unique relationship in North Dakota, where we have a very unique partnership with the Wild Sheep Foundation. And there's an auction license that they use, that's authorized by North Dakota legislature, that they use to auction off a license to anyone, and then it creates dollars, puts dollars directly into our management program for sheep. And that dollar amount's gotten to be pretty significant over the years. There's obviously some people out there that are very willing, want to come to North Dakota to hunt a sheep, and in return, we're able to take those dollars and benefit wild sheep in North Dakota. It's been a great relationship as far as the funding for those, just because bighorn sheep are such a small amount of what we do with the department, but a very important part of what we do. And so their numbers have been doing better. We talked a lot in 2014, 2015 about the pneumonia outbreak, bacteria pneumonia outbreak in the bighorn sheep in North Dakota. Fortunately, we think we've done pretty well with rebounding on that. A lot of research has shown anytime you have that pneumonia outbreak, that anywhere from 30% to 90% mortality. We were much closer to that 30%, which is good news. And then after that, you're still going to see some challenges with lamb reproduction and recruitment. But over the last couple of years, we've been seeing some good things associated with that. And so we feel better about where we were now than where we were in 2014.
A wildlife species that we've talked a lot about here in the last 10 years, mountain lions. You know, we have a breeding population out in western North Dakota in the Badlands. Explain a little bit about the mountain lion study.
Yeah, we needed to learn a lot about mountain lions in a short period of time, Mike. As you remember, and most people remember, 2005 was our first season. But you know, prior to 2005, started to get some information about some breeding population in the state, and you know, up until that point, it was not documented, and just more sightings, more sign of lions in the state. And so 2005 was the first season, and so that was a way. And I know people don't always agree with this, but you know, having an experimental season with a very limited take is a form of research in itself. It was going to be a way to learn a little bit more, and then also in the meantime, a study put into place as far as looking at mountain lion numbers and figuring out. We needed some things as far as trying to help us figure out how to manage lions in North Dakota, as far as, number one, having to address, you know, public concern of having lions on the landscape in the numbers that we feel that they were, and doing it responsibly to make sure that, again, we're not an agency that is in the extermination business. And so, but also managing those concerns with landowner tolerance and those types of issues. And so the lion study, again, like with a lot of our mark and recapture studies where these collars were placed on lions, gave us just such good information, again, about the home range, about their survivability, about reproduction, things that we can really look at as an agency to help us into the future to look. And one of the things that study did teach us a little bit, again, was that as a department, we did have a big impact on those lion numbers as far as harvest. I mean, as far as the human footprint on those, as far as the take goes. And so the numbers that we put in place are pretty important when it comes to mountain lion management. We don't have a large population. We don't have a lot of really good mountain lion habitat. There's some mountain lion habitat in North Dakota that can be looked at as fair, but probably not a lot of habitat that can be considered to be excellent. And so there's no doubt that the excellent habitat area in North Dakota that we have holds lions, and then some of that area, the peripheral area, holds some occasionally as well, and see a lot of movement. But just some different things with mountain lions too that's always interesting is the movement of them, and you see that with them. You hear some different things. We've had some experiences in North Dakota of some lions that have actually come through North Dakota that have had a collar on them, or some that have moved out of North Dakota with a collar on them. And so they do move, especially those young males. And one of the things that we'd like to take a look at pretty closely, and we've been doing now the last couple years too, is when we're seeing some of the lion movements outside of the Badlands area, asking yourself, okay, are those lions that are coming out of the Badlands, or are those lions that are coming from somewhere else? And we're able to test that with genetic lab to be able to determine that. And most of the lions that we're seeing over in Zone 2 that have been in that area over the last couple of years have been either lions from South Dakota or Montana. Very few actually from the Badlands. And so that continues to be kind of interesting for us, because that was a question. It's like, okay, if we have lions out in the state here, and knowing that their numbers are not super high, why would they be leaving? I mean, one of the reasons, of course, that young lions leave is for their own survival. If they don't leave, a lot of times there's going to be an older, mature tom in that area that's going to kill them. And so that was something that, again, is interesting for us, interesting as far as the management of the population. But there's no doubt one thing always stays the same with lions is it's a topic of conversation wherever you go. And we've seen that over the years now in North Dakota as lions have showed up in pretty much every corner of the state. And it is something that we have learned an awful lot about from the beginning, where we didn't know an awful lot about lions in North Dakota as far as management. So we've had a lot of talks with the public, had some good research projects in place, and feel a little more comfortable now than when we did when we started.
And that's why we do some of these projects, Jeb, is to learn and how to manage these wildlife species.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, number one, it's our responsibility. And like we talked about before, we feel very fortunate about the opportunity to have some of the budget resources to be able to learn more about these. And, again, with mountain lions, very difficult. It's one of the things where a lot of other species, you can get some airplanes up in the air and you can get a handle on things as far as where are they at, what's their abundance, those types of things. Certainly take some time and resources, but with lions, that's not something you can do. Very, very secretive animal, hard to get information on. About the only way you're going to do that is through some type of caller study to where you can get that information, that real-time information that is collected over a number of years as far as their home ranges, where they're spending time, their reproductive status, things like that. And so that's been super important to us as a department, which again has put us in a better situation, better position to responsibly manage those critters.
Jeb, all these studies, what's the biggest challenge for you and your biologist managing these wildlife out in the Badlands?
Well, one of the things we always talk about, Mike, is the actual management, whether it be research, abundance, location, things like that in North Dakota as far as our game species go is relatively easy. Now, I don't mean that in the term that there's no effort associated with that. I mean, it takes a lot of effort, a lot of coordination. But then how do you divide up those opportunities and do that in a fair, equitable way to all the public? You have a lot of public that live in North Dakota as a quality of life issue for the hunting and fishing resources. And it means a lot to them. You have landowners that then deal with having some of those critters on their property year-round a lot of times that deal with some of the negative aspects of that. And so it's a balancing act that I don't know. I can't say that we do it perfectly. I guess I'll never say we do it perfectly, but we try really hard to look at those opportunities and to see that those resources are as equitable as possible for anybody that lives in the state of North Dakota. Because I think it is really important that everybody has an opportunity for wildlife, and our public wildlife opportunities are set up and here today just because of that. People didn't want a European model of wildlife in the states, and so that's why state wildlife agencies exist. And some of those issues that come up legislatively, we try to work to the best solution to where the public is benefited the most.
Most of these wildlife populations are doing good out in the North Dakota Badlands.
That's the good news, right? Yeah, it's 10 years ago, if we would have been standing out here, there was some different trends going on, and not saying that we're not going to have those trends again. I mean, there's no doubt anytime you're dealing with wildlife, you're dealing with, like I talked about earlier, some ebbs and flows, a little bit of a roller coaster, and especially in North Dakota, where in the upper Midwest, winter matters. It still matters, and we can get some winters that definitely make a difference. But having good habitat on the landscape, conservative management, definitely goes a long way as far as trying to preserve some of these opportunities for the public, and of course that's directly related to how those critters are managed to make sure that there's opportunity for the public when they get them.
A lot of great information, Jeb. Thank you much.
Thank you, Mike.
To find out more about the wildlife studies that we talked about today, visit the Game and Fish website at gf.nd.gov. For Wildlife Division Chief Jeb Williams and the rest of the staff here at the Game and Fish Department, thanks for joining us for this week's Outdoors Online. We'll see you again next week.